Guys, Ben Travovic here from the Manly Seagulls.
Comes through Luai.
The SuperCoach Experience podcast is one of the best podcasts going around, boys.
They go to hole.
Keep doing what you're doing, and I just want to say, what a podcast. Go the Mighty Eagles.
Hey lads, Ewan Aiken here from the New Zealand Warriors. Hope you have a big year with the SuperCoach Experience podcast.
He's got the ball to Sims. It's down to hole. It's done it again. What a pass.
And welcome to the SuperCoach Experience Sunday night pod. Round 17 is in the books. No more buys to be concerned about. We're all concerned about the run home. But before we get involved with the run home, it's important to recap the round 17 that was. I'm the host of the Sunday pod, MAXI, here from London in my temporary accommodation over here. If you hear bells in the background, that's St. Paul's. So apologies for that. And haven't got my good mic, but hopefully this will just have to do. So a big week. I scored 659. The issue with my side is I had a couple of late outs. So the key outs for me were Ryan Madison not playing. I mean, that's a huge one. I was banking on about 70 points from him up in a really good match up against the Tigers. There wasn't too much late mail. And I mean, hopefully, didn't bring him in or trade him in. But I mean, 70 points in a buy round like this could have taken me from where I scored to, potentially getting a green arrow. So there was Ryan Madison that was out, and Michael Molo. Again, I wasn't banking on a huge amount of points from him, but a nice 30 would have been good. And of course, Nico Hines. But I think he's so widely owned that everyone had him. So I was lucky enough to captain IPAP. So got that 180 score in my captaincy, which was fantastic. And of course, I had Cody Walker like most teams did. But besides that, really, there wasn't too much hot in my side this week. My trades were Payne Haas, Joe Offengawi. As discussed on the pod, I really thought Joe was a good trade in after hearing, I think it was Mikey talk about it a couple of weeks ago. He just looks like he's getting the minutes. Looking like a fantastic player, and 64 is as a floor is fantastic for the front row. So I'm really happy with him. I can hold him for the rest of the season, assuming that there's not too many minutes changes or rookies blooded for the Tigers, which is a fantastic trade. So I'm really, really happy with that. Also brought in Jed Cartwright for a 49. I don't think anyone really went wrong with any of the second row nuffs that went on, but I was happy with him. And I brought in Pappenhausen for Munster. The last of those trades, I'm not too hot on after the 49 that Pap put up. It's when you trade someone out like Munster, knowing that you have to bring him back, you would ideally want a better score from Pappenhausen. But the fact that he was brought in by everyone this week, round 17, he was a key VC or C. And if you turned up and you didn't have him as your VC or C, you were probably going to get a red arrow. Means that you need to bring him in. So 49 from him, but I've got 9 trades left, and I'll be looking to bring in Munster at a later date. And you never know what happens with Origin. Munster might get, obviously, of course, there's the concerns around COVID with Munster, which is obviously a bit of an issue. That's going to be a key concern. So he might be out for the game. I say he's going to be out for the game after, from what I'm hearing. So that's obviously 2 weeks you kind of got him out for. So I think that everyone who traded out Munster, yes, you got to bring him back in. You got to have a plan to bring him back in, but it's not the worst trade in the world, even if you went to someone like Pappenhausen. In terms of the other lads, they'll cover that on the Tuesday pod. But from what I see, they all had fantastic weeks, in particular Timmy. But Jake scored 727, which is a fantastic score for a game like this. He captained Dylan in, and that's with Captain Dylan Brown. Mikey had 764, and that's with captain Sean Lane. So fantastic week. I mean, if these guys got their captains on point with say an IPAP or even a Cody Walker, the ranks would have been huge. And I don't have Savages, but I will just quickly check. I know Timmy's was huge, and Timmy got 1,011. So absolutely ridiculous score. Brought in and captained Mitchell Moses for 230 points. Also had Kentodi Staggs for a 99, Cody Walker for a 119, Latrell Mitchell for a 93. I mean, this guy is probably going to go back to back. Fantastic score. I mean, the man's Nostradamus, let's be honest. So fantastic round by Timmy. And yeah, I'd say he's at least top 50 with a round like that. He might even be close to the top. So fantastic work by Timmy. In terms of par for this week, I think you're looking at around 600 to 650 as a minimum. I'm seeing in my group, in my leagues, a lot of 700s, 800s, and then there's a couple of 900s which are going on. Actually, I would say it's more around 700. So with the outs and all that, if you scored over 700, I think you're looking pretty all right. But if you scored around 900 or above, you're looking for some really, really, really big greens. So congratulations to those who did that. So moving on to the games, 4 games to cover today, arising out of this week's matchups. Some really interesting takeaways to bring from it. So without further ado, let's get into it. So the first matchup of the week was the Cronulla Sharks versus the Melbourne Storm. So quite a surprising game, considering we thought Storm would put up a bit better of a competitive matchup than this. 6 points from a Storm outfit that probably were favoured to, to score at least, I would say, 16 to 20 points is a little bit concerning. But the Sharks really just put it on a plate and said, here's this. So Jesse Ramian was the top scorer with 133, looked fantastic. And that was kind of always the consideration with Sharks, is they have so many fantastic outside backs with Katoa and Mulatalo and Talakai, obviously prior to Origin selection, Will Kennedy, and it was which one do you go for? And Jesse Ramian was floated around, but due to injury and items of that sort, suspension too, I think it was, he was kind of swept under the rug a bit. But obviously came through with 133. Looked absolutely fantastic and came through with a great score. He was only owned. This is to tell you the importance of pods. 1% teams for Jesse Ramian. I mean, absolutely ridiculous. Fantastic score by him. And as we'll discuss later, the Sharks end run home is actually really good. So you can hold the assets for the rest of the season after the next. If you can maybe bench your Katoas, maybe Will Kennedy's, and if you brought in Ramian, maybe Ramian's the next 3. I mean, next 2, sorry. They've got the Cowboys and Penrith. Maybe that's something that you do, but after that, they've got a very favourable run home. So well done to those who brought in Sharks players this week. And we've also got some honourable mentions with Blake Brayley coming back in with an 82. Cam McInnes looked really nice with the 72. Looks back to the Cam McInnes that people foresaw when they brought him in a couple of weeks ago. Big minutes, big base stats. Look fantastic. Mulatalo wasn't exactly the highest scorer, the high score we would expect when bringing someone like him in. I mean, he had that early try. 57 is all right, but we would have expected a bit more, especially if you brought him in for around that 620k range that he was a couple of weeks back. You'd be looking for a bit more than him, but still not a score that's really going to diminish you too much this week. We had Katoa with a 55, Will Kennedy with a 55, so I'm sure Savs will be happy with, or at least partly satisfied with a 55. And there wasn't really any poor scores behind, of course. If you had T. Wilton, I don't think anyone has him, but he was an early season kind of high scorer with a 22. Fafita came in with a 34, so for those who've held him, that's a really handy score for a bye round. So some good scores there from the Sharks, and they played absolutely fantastic down there. So from a Storm perspective, we had the Chiefs with 62. That included 10 minutes in the bin. So, I mean, he looked fantastic, and I've been kind of critical of him in recent pods, talking about how, you know, his body appears to have changed to play the prop position, or 13, and how, you know, he doesn't look like he's got that burst that he did last year when he was scoring tries seemingly every week when I didn't own him. But I mean, 62 is nice with the sin bin in there, so he looked pretty good. Had that assist there, I believe. Which obviously is great. It's great for his owners. If you're looking for a dual hooker position for the round home, I'd be looking at trading him out ASAP. I just don't think there's going to be that many high scores in him unless you've got Harry Grant out. But again, we'll see what happens with Origin. We don't know what injury is going to arise from that. And look, if Harry Grant's out for for this week or for a couple more weeks after this, you know, due to injury or items of that sort, maybe cheese a hold. But otherwise, you know, nuff someone out and bring in Cook or someone of that if you want to go for that dual hooker strategy. Decent score from Jerome Hughes, 56. Again, in the side that scores 6 points, it's not too bad. However, if you brought him in instead of Paps, or you want a bit of a pod route in that realm, you're probably not that stoked, considering if you've got Nico Hines and Cleary, it's going to be very, very hard to squeeze in your Teddies and into the fullback position and get the big four. 49 from Ryan Pappenhausen. Again, not too bad, not too great. So just not what we probably expected when you put a player for about 930 odd K. The negatives, I mean, Grant Anderson, 17. A lot of the boys didn't actually go him on the pod a couple of weeks back, and look, they made the right choice. He's obviously a talent. He'll be a great player for years to come, but very raw talent, and just not getting the scores at the moment. You know, 17 isn't great in base, and that's 2 scores we've got in him. So I don't know whether the cash is going to be that fantastic, but obviously I'm relatively sure he's going to be out for a while. So, you know, he'll just nuff out quite nicely, which is, and of course won't be an AE nightmare. So not bad. Other honourable mentions, Nick Meaney with 53. Again, for the people who bought him, he appears to be relatively solid. He's always kind of that one where he peaked a bit early, and people were saying we're not going to bring him in at, I think he's around about 583 in round 10 after a couple of good scores. I think he had 170, and people were considering him for the run, but he's scored 70, 78, 85, and 77 over the last 4 weeks. So he's owned again by 5% of people, a massive pod. And Storm don't have too bad of a run home. It's not fantastic, but they do have Warriors and Titans in round 20 and 21. So if you're a Meaney owner, I mean, they've got Canberra also in round 18 and South who have been kind of up and down in round 19. So if you're one of the 5% which owns Meaney, I think you'll lap it up. He's a great pod and looking fantastic, and we don't know what's going to happen with the Melbourne injuries, and you know, Papson still looked a little bit underdone. So we'll see what happens there. But I mean, 50, what was it? 53 in a 6-point scoring outfit is, I mean, very good. So that covers that round off. In terms of sells and holds, as I've spoken before with the Sharks, I think after the next 2, they've got a really good run home. I think you hold any of the players you can. You know, Katoa's, unless you're going to Kennedy to a Teddy, and even then I'd be concerned after Origin whether he backs up or not. I'd be kind of holding them to the extent you can. The last 4, fantastic. Particularly, and from a Storm perspective, you hold your Storm assets, say for your Brandon Smiths and whoever, for anyone that held on to Josh King. I think you try and maybe think about moving them on soon. That comes off the first game of the round. So the second game of the round was a very high-scoring affair. Rabbitohs versus the Newcastle Knights. So top scorer was Cody Walker. Looked fantastic. I mean, he could have had probably 140, 150 points. Just looked to have his hands and everything, which is great because for those people who were considering a Brown, maybe after this week will consider or will reconsider their options and maybe hold on to someone like Cody. I know Souths have got quite a difficult run home. I actually don't think it's too bad considering a lot of the others are very, very mixed. And that's something I'll build up on in the later part of this episode, which is there are some good runs home, but it's not like everyone that's got a fantastic run home and Souths have a mixed run home. Most sides have a very mixed run home. So there's a couple of avenues or areas where you can pick up players for 2 or 3 weeks. They've got a fantastic run, but broadly speaking, most teams have a relatively mixed run home. So from South's perspective, if you brought in a Latrell, again, we'll talk about Latrell now. In fact, with a 93, looked again fantastic. He's just such a talent and incredible, just bouncing off tackles, looking fantastic. I'd be considering holding on to them and until maybe we get a good score out of Teddy if you trade out Teddy. But yeah, these South players, I don't think I'd be selling many of them. And I don't think you have the trades too either. But anyway, enough of my rambling. 190 from Cody Walker, 93 from Latrell Mitchell, 91 from Richie Kenner. Condolences goes out to Mikey, who has AJ, who was laid out, and anyone else who has AJ. I mean, that would have been AJ, and I think AJ probably was quite a bit better too. I mean, AJ's base is a lot better than Richie Kenner's as of late. So relatively good performance there from Richie Kenner. For anyone that perhaps didn't go or Grant Anderson and went Richie Kenner for 1 week, you're an absolute genius. You should come host this podcast instead of me. Also good scores, Tommy Burgess with 76. I mean, Kaloma Tungi with a 55. It's not bad. Didn't have any particularly huge attacking stats, so looked fantastic as always. Jake Carter with a 49. Isaiah Tasks with a 43, which again isn't too bad for her player's price. And for those, I mean, I would say most of the people who own him either maybe brought him in last week and got the great score out of him then, or have owned him previously and held him for round 17. So well done to those owners. That's another good price from Isaiah Tass. And I believe he's got a very favourable, break even of 12. He has a 71 in his rolling average. Very nice. So he'll jump up in price again, 314k. So you'd think he'd be about 50k after this week. So looking pretty nice there for Isaiah Tass. Some negatives. If you had Ilias, again, 0. But if you had people like, I know Shaquille Mitchell was kind of maybe a bit of a pod cheapie to bring in. 20 is not fantastic, but also it's not that bad. Tane Milne with a 37, I don't think too many people had him. So probably all right. And from a South perspective, if you own some South players, you're relatively happy with what they put forward, especially with your big origin outs like Cook and Murray. And from a Newcastle perspective, you're also really happy because I think the majority of Newcastle players who were owned by SuperCoaches, Mitch Barnett, your David Clemmers, scored really well. Mitch Barnett with a 97, which included that try in junk time, as they like to call it in SuperCoach circles. Which it's a differentiator around like this. So fantastic score. And Newcastle have Manly in round 18. I don't think that's a particularly fantastic matchup, but they've got Bulldogs in round 20 and West Tigers in round 21. So if you run out of trays, you have someone like Barney. His last 3 scores, 71, 46, and then 97. I don't think you're too concerned with that. So for those who went, congratulations. Edric Lee, again, continues to just score massive amounts of tries. Negative 59 break even for anyone who did the Akinda Uarte trade in, I remember a couple of years back where you brought him purely because he had a huge score in his rolling average. 172 followed it back up with that score. He's going to just skyrocket in price. And again, a lot of differentiating score on around 17. David Clemmer with the 70, which included a send-off, which was a bit interesting to watch. And also he had that try there, which was, again, fantastic to see Davey put that one down. So good for him. So he would have scored really, really well if it was that send-off. So good to those who brought in Davey, and I think a majority of those who brought him in would have brought him in for Payne Haas again. So he's one you can hold for the rest of the season, pretty all right. He's not going to do too much to diminish you at all. We also had Chris Randall, 49 for those who held him. That's a really good score in a bye like this. And that's really it from the Knights' perspective. Dom Young with a 73 looked good. Frizzell with a 62 comes back into some form. Daniel Saifidi again coming through, which was good. So pretty much everyone SuperCoach relevant besides Ilias's scored pretty decent this round. So again, you're happy. In terms of trade-ins, trade-outs for run home, I think considering if you brought in someone like an Edric Lee, obviously you'd be trading him out after the next couple, after he's peaked, just because he doesn't have that particularly massive base. But besides that, I don't know whether anyone. I mean, you have Chris Randall. You'd probably be looking at moving him as ASAP because Jane Brayley obviously played. So moving him to a hooker as soon as you can. But we'll have to see what happens with Cook. From a South perspective, as I said, I think you hold all those guys, save for maybe your TAS, which if you have the trades to move on, you move on. I guess, as I've said before, I don't think the South run is as bad as people are saying it is. It's having particular regard to other teams having quite a mixed draw, which means theirs doesn't look as bad than it does in isolation. On to the next game. We have the Tigers and the Eels. So this was, again, quite an interesting match. You'd think that the Eels would just smash them, but look, it was a really close game. And watching the KM minis back, lots of interesting discussion points to talk about here. I'd say that probably the first talking point is Mitch Moses, 115, looked absolutely fantastic. Timmy, I just don't understand. He's an absolute genius. Captaining him, just absolutely ridiculous. But I mean, Eels have a relatively good draw home. In fact, they're one of the favorites in terms of runs home. Especially they come up against the Warriors next week. So, I mean, if Mitch Moses puts another score together, the worst thing that the position you're in means you're probably at 700k in a couple of weeks' time, and you can trade him off to an out-and-out keeper. But again, we don't know what's going to happen with Origin, but at least you got Mitchell Moses, who's playing fantastic, and great trading for those who brought him in. Now he's also owned by he's not necessarily a massive pod. He's still owned by I think about 14 or 15%, but still great trade and great asset to have in a round like this. We also had Isaiah Papali'i, fantastic with a score of 90. That included a try with no line break. He looks fantastic. If you don't have him, get him in ASAP. He's the best front rower in the game, and he's just looking like he's in front. When I say best front rower, I mean best SuperCoach front rower in the game, and just looking fantastic week in, week out. He can score any week, and something fantastic about having someone in your front row who can do that. Mike Acevo with 79, good for those who brought him in. He hasn't been scoring particularly too well in most recent weeks, so good to have him in a round like that come through with the 79. That try he scored was fantastic. So in a round like this where he scored a couple of low scores, such as I think it's a 30 and 32 and an 18 that he scored in recent weeks to match up with I think a 75 or a 78. So if you brought him in, you're looking for a score like that in a round like this. So 79, fantastic there. Clint Gutherson with the 59. I know Jakey was talking about potentially bringing him instead of Latrell. I think he's a much better asset Latrell in the fullback position and Gutho. I know Gutho can go on the runs, but for those who brought Gutho in over Latrell, bad luck. But with the Eels run home, I think you're doing all right. And you'll see what happens with the other fullbacks coming in. I think that the key talking point is Dylan Brown with 57. If you're someone who went Munster out to Dylan Brown, and you go with a Dylan Brown to Cody Walker combination, I think like Savs did, I'd be slightly concerned with the 57. You brought Dylan Brown in for a game like this to ton up and be like a 110, 120 scorer. And I know Eels run home is good, and we'll see what happens with Munster. So I think that the fact that he's going to be out, I think at least this week, it plays in your favour. But you're in a game like this, you're looking for a huge score from Dylan Brown. And this was a key game for him to kind of step up, and I think the Eels didn't look their best. So unfortunate for Dylan Brown. But that's what Dylan Brown can do. He can score you 130s and look fantastic, and he can also score you. 57's all right, but against Tigers, it's not what you would expect when you bring someone like him in. No real poor scores besides Will Penasini with a 22. But for those who held, I think most people are sold out of him, and I think it's at least 15% that own him. Probably don't place. It's 34% that still own him. Wow, didn't realize that many owned him. That's not really a fantastic score, but he's done some great service for you over the season. Hopefully, didn't bring him in this week, and he's probably someone I'd be actually looking at moving on soon. And if you had Niokore or Makatoa, you're happy that they played this week. A lot of people brought in Sean Lane. I think that try disallowed. So that 50 could have easily been a 70. I don't think it's that bad of a score. Again, if you're trading out, an important asset like a Crichton to get Sean Lane, you wouldn't be too happy. But 50 is not a terrible score, and he's in amongst it, which is all right, but could have been a different. If you're not like Mike and you didn't captain him, I think you're relatively okay with that one. But again, if it comes off, it comes off in SuperCoach. If it doesn't, well, at least you risked it. At least you risked it for the biscuit. In Tigers outfit, you had David Nofoaluma with an 81, and it's fascinating to talk about David Nofoaluma because in a Tigers outfit, which is potentially one of the worst teams we've seen in a long while, he's still averaging quite all right. His average is, and let me just pick it up, 52.5. He can put these games together. They have Penrith next week, so if you have David Nofoaluma, you kind of take that good score and move. But huge spot for this week with 81. Joel Fangao, as I spoke about previously, with a 64. I think the Nuff option in the front row, Fanua Pole, I think that's a fantastic trade-in. He scored really well. So he had a 44 against the Warriors, and he backs that up with 48. So it's fantastic. And if he can continue to get those points, he might be a Max King 2.0. So fantastic for those who brought him in. I didn't. Might think about bringing him in potentially in my front row next week, but we will see. But just a good kind of option there for people. I know there's a bit of concern about him potentially coming in and then going out, but I think as long as he's named and playing those minutes, very good option. And if you've got an injury or got to lay out in the front row, he's someone you can easily slot in and it won't hurt you too much. Luke Garner with 41. Again, I don't think Mike is going to be too happy with that one, but not really bad. When Gatesbury doesn't score try, he's looking around that score. Stefano Utoikimanu, he scored a 45, so decent score from him, 292k, and he's getting up to speed quite quickly. He was a very hot preseason favourite, so if you're looking for a downgrade option and someone, I'd probably go Pole, but maybe see how Stefano's going in weeks to come, where they can get back up to that kind of preseason estimations of him. Adam Dwyer with a 27, which is interesting. I don't think many people brought him in this week. He's only owned in 393 teams, but that's a ridiculous pod. But he'll come down in price really nicely after a 14 to 36. So he's one of those people, for the run home, if Tigers hit some even ounce of form, he could be a massive pod for the run home. And again, he's available in the centre wing. So keep an eye on him. He's a bit of a hog, but for Supercoach purposes, that's always a good thing. So Dway here, 675k, but hopefully if he gets down to the 400k mark, might be someone we'll need to look at. But besides that, I mean, anyone that you really went, even if you went another one of the cheapies, I think you're not too upset with that. Which brings us on to our last game of the week. Broncos, Dragons. Some massive scores here from Broncos, especially if you held on to Tony Staggs. 9-9 from him, looks fantastic. Yeah, I mean, just fantastic matchup. Tessie New with 139. I'm gonna have a check and see how widely owned he is. He's owned in 361 teams, so a massive pod for the 361 who owned him. I mean, again, looked amazing. This is a cool one. So if you didn't decide to get Grant Anderson and you went, say, Richie Kenner, you're happy. But if you were also one of those who held off and maybe saw your numbers, saw Mano go out and think, oh, I need another number for the round 17 bye, and you went Deloise Hoyter, you're also very happy. He was owned by 805 teams, so there were a fair few teams which brought him in. And he looked fantastic with a 94. That is a separational score for this round, and fantastic work for those who brought him in. Again, also another Nuff-based option, Zach Hosking with 62. I mean, it's just these are borderline keeper scores in a round 17 bye. Yeah, it's kind of one of the things which I'm slightly regretful of is not bringing someone like a Hoskins into Burbo potentially. That extra boost and that extra number would have been really good for me in the round 17 bye. But alas, we live and we learn from SuperCoach. Adam Reynolds with a 33. For those who have him, not a great score. I think he's had a couple of trade outs, but he's 4%, so he's still on 6,000 sides. Not fantastic, and this is what we spoke about when we were thinking about. He got up to that 650k mark, or 680k in fact, and we thought, is he a keeper? This is what we kind of thought about him. He can go on these, hundreds type runs because he's in and around everything the Broncos do. I think with Ed Ramam coming in though, he's taken a much more of a game manager role. And not looking as fantastic as he otherwise is in terms of SuperCoach. So a 40, a 49, and backed up with this score, he's going to see a significant price drop, and not particularly what you want for the buy. From a Dragons perspective, I mean, there weren't too many poor scores. Ravelau with a 21 wasn't fantastic, but the key ones, let's start that off with Cody Ramsey. I've spoken about him before on this pod a couple of times. He looked a couple of weeks ago when everyone was getting in. I don't know who it was. Maybe it was Grant Anderson. He could be a potential, cheaper to go instead. And he scored relatively well, 94, 54, 32, 70, 29, and now backs that up with an 80. That's a pretty good type of run to have from a cheapie. So good to those who have him. I don't think he's widely owned. Again, another pod kind of outfit there. He's owned by 8% of teams. So again, great pod for those who have him. Jack Bell with 56 looks pretty good. Blake Laurie with 71. Moses Hawley, again, one of those ones which I've been talking about for a couple of weeks as potentially an alternative to Lomax. He scored an 82, a 60, a 70, and now back that up with a 71. He's looking fantastic and priced at 507k. Dragons run isn't great, but they do finish up with the Titans, the Tigers, and the Broncos. So keep an eye on Sully because when he was at Manly, I was a fan of him. Obviously, in attack, his defense leaves a lot to be desired. But yeah, I mean, with scores like that from SuperCoach perspective, he looks like he's someone you could possibly hold for the rest of the season. So that's there from a Dragons perspective. Zach Lomax with 51. Again, not going to hurt you. But for those who brought him in or who had him, he's relatively widely owned. I think you'd be expecting a little bit more from Zaki, 15% of teams. But again, 51, he'll just hold him for the rest of the season. He just finds a way to get amongst the points, even when he's not scoring tries. So that kind of finishes it off for the round. Again, as I've spoken about, I don't think my scores are particularly fantastic. I think 650, 700 is actually going to be par. But if you scored above that, you are looking absolutely fantastic. And I'm in a lot of Podmasters leagues with a lot of fantastic managers. Yeah, you've got some really good scores in here. I mean, I'm on with 741, host of the YouTube channel. Mikey with 764, Jakey with a 727. Just some really good scores across the park. So I think you'll be looking at that. But alas, we can only be concerned about round 17 for a while. I think I'll see a bit of a drop in ranks. I'm thinking probably 800, maybe 2,000 down, which will bring me down a bit. But hopefully I can get some pods in for the round home and get back up to where the lads are, because we're all doing relatively well in the SuperCoach experience. It'd be fantastic if you all finish in the top 1,000. But I've got 8 trades left, so enough to bring in Munster, who's the only real one I think I need to bring in after Origin, which I'm very fortunate because I held on to Harry Grant, so that kind of saves that. Yes, I didn't get that price, the benefit of going someone else and waiting for Harry Grant to drop price, but it means to bring him back in. I don't think Haas is a must for the run home. So that brings us on to the kind of second part of this pod, which is analysis of runs home. Now, I've kind of been through the runs home, and most teams are mixed. So you'll have your Panthers and Cowboys there. So an example is even Sharks, right? There's still a significant amount of runs home. So the next two, they've got Cowboys and Penrith. Not a good run home. Not a good run. They've also got South after that, who they're not an incredible side to play. So the next three, they aren't fantastic. However, after that, they open up with St. George, fantastic matchup. Tigers, Manly. Again, I don't think Manly's the walkover people are saying they are. I think Manly 13 plus, greatest team of all time. And they come up with Bulldogs and Knights in their finals. They're probably an argument for one of the best runs home. But you've got 3 very difficult matchups with Cowboys, Penrith, and South, and Manly's in there too. So it's not the run home, not the amazing runs home we're used to seeing. But as again, I think you, as I've spoken previously, you hold your Shark, the majority of your Sharks assets. Over the next 2 ticks, you can bench Katoa. I might even think about benching Mortalo this week. I'm just really hot on the Cowboys, but you hold on to them. But relatively speaking, most teams have quite a mixed draw. I mean, the key ones again, Sharks. The other ones also Eels. A lot of people are discussing Eels and their fantastic run home. Yes, they have Warriors, followed by Broncos, but then they come into Penrith, Manly, Souths. I don't think those are particularly fantastic matchups. You've got Bulldogs, Broncos, and then Melbourne in the final matchup. So broadly speaking, it's a relatively all right run home, but it's mixed. It's not an incredible run home, and you hold on to your Parramatta assets, and I'm looking at, if you're a Dylan Brown owner, VC against the Warriors could be fantastic, but yeah, mixed run home again. But you've got your Sean Lanes, which I think people brought in this week. Dylan Browns, IPAP's Madison's when he's back. If you had Gutho, I think you probably look at holding him. But I don't know how much we need to speak about Eels, because I think you probably brought him in for this round, as with the Sharks. So other runs home which are fantastic, we have, are purportedly fantastic, but they're relatively mixed. I've got the Manly, Broncos, Raiders, and Titans. So Manly comes up with again, relatively mixed, but you've got Newcastle, and St. George next too. Amazing matchups for Manly. So your Garricks, your Olakau'atus, I mean, they're keepers, so you hold them to the end, but still, like, think of them as maybe VC options against those two sides, because I'd say would be heavily favoured in both of those. You also got the Titans and the Bulldogs. You got the Titans around 22, the Bulldogs in around 25, but you've got which are great and great matchups, and of course I don't think anyone's got Manly assets which aren't keepers at this stage. If you've got Burbo, you're like me, I think you're probably looking at nothing him out ASAP. But if you've got your Garricks and your Olakau'atus, you hold on to them. But I mean, sprinkled in, then you've got the Roosters in round 20, Parramatta in round 21, Raiders in round 24, Sharks in round 23. So again, a mixed draw, but I mean, broad perspective, it's relatively all right. So that's the Seagulls done. You've also got the Broncos. Now, if you're an Ezra Mam owner like me, you're probably looking at shifting him on as soon as you can for a Munster, but we'll see how that goes. He scored all right this week with a 62, so probably one probably should have spoken about. But he's going to hold his price, and they come up against the Titans next week, followed by Parramatta. But then they've got the Tigers, and in round 22 they've got Newcastle, followed by quite a difficult run of Melbourne and Parramatta. So I mean, to the extent, you'd hold them for this week against Titans, and if you can bench your Broncos assets, say for Tony Staggs maybe in round 19, use that Tigers game, and maybe you sell them round 23 or round 21 against the Roosters for some better assets. But that's a relatively all right draw. Dragons, Titans, Tigers, Newcastle, and Dragons again in the final game. Not a bad run. So I think you'll probably find that Staggs is going to be held by two for the rest of the season. And I mean, if you brought in the cheapie this week, I think you hold on to him, maybe playing based on matchup. I think Deloise Hoyter do that. So that's the Tigers done. The Broncos done. My bad. So another great run is another relatively good run is the Canberra Raiders. They come up against Melbourne. However, they then go Warriors and Titans in round 19, round 20, followed by Penrith. But then they've got the Dragons, the Knights, Manly, and Tigers. So I'd say Tigers, Knights, Dragons, Titans, and Warriors are fantastic matchup. So I think they've got one of the best runs. Assets, you're looking at Joe Tapine. If you don't have him, like me, I think you're looking to bring him in as soon as you can. He looks absolutely fantastic. I just don't know how I'm going to swing it. You can't have everyone, and I'm going to be looking to prioritise getting Munster back in a couple of weeks. Maybe if you've got the cash, you go someone to like a Max King, to a Joseph Tapine, or if Madison's out again. But yeah, he looks like and he's owned by 25% of teams, so I just think that number's going to go up. And if you don't have him, it's going to kind of hurt you. And it's just, I think no matter what, whether he's played 62 minutes or 45 minutes like he did against the Knights in round 15, he's a keeper in the front row, and you kind of got to bring him in. 670k though is no cheap price. You've also got Hudson Young. I know Timmy had him for a while. I don't know whether Timmy still has him. Decent kind of option. He scored relatively good. But besides that, I mean, you've got Rapana. I wouldn't go down that route. If you've got Xavier Savage, I think you also probably hold on to him. See how he goes against, at least bench him for the Melbourne game and play him round 19-20 and see how he goes there. But I mean, even Hudson Young, you've got a 75 and 87 of 77. I mean, that's keeper territory for Hudson Young. So I think if you've got him, you hold him to someone like him, and maybe looking at him as a pod for round 19 and 20. I mean, as he does have that kind of attacking stat in him. So that's the Raiders, and kind of I've got some interesting kind of little block plays to run home. So the Titans' final 3 games are incredible, and the Cowboys' next 4 games are incredible. So let's start with the Cowboys. So if you've got someone like Drinkwater, I mean, the next 4 games are incredible. Next 3 games after round 18 are incredible. So you've got West Tigers, St. George, and Bulldogs. Besides the Warriors, I don't think you can have a better run than that. But don't worry, because after the Roosters in round 22, they've got the Warriors. So 4 out of the next 6 matchups are pretty much incredible. So, if you've got Drinkwater, Tamalolo, if you've got Tuilagi, who you've held on to him and you're not going to trade him out this week if obviously he's out of Origin. Look at those assets. That is an incredible run, and pod play might be, if you can somehow swing Scott Drinkwater 5/8, bring him in for say an Ezra Mam, if you've got the trades, and pod play him for the next 4, and then bring back in Munster. I think that's a big balls play. So look at that and look at other ways to get Scotty Drinkwater in, because I think he's just in amongst it. As I said, the last 4 games, 119, 90, 50, and 87. So, wow. And those were against, relatively easy opposition in Titans, Dragons. Then you got the Broncos and Manly sprinkled in there. So I'm looking at him for this week as a potential trading option. And with my 8 trades, I know it's not too many, but he's someone who's he's only owned by 16% of teams. It's not like he's owned by everyone in the top 1,000 or the top 2,000. So, yeah, looking at someone like him. In terms of pods for this one, I talked to our resident pod expert, Mikey, and we've both kind of chatted about Val Holmes, the potential pod. So 595K, again with that incredible run over the next 6 matches. Scored 99-86 in the last 2. And got a break even of 18. So if you want to go, I think you go this week. Owned by 7% of teams, and just looks to be. I think I was listening to it on one of the pods. Maybe it was Bloke the other week, and he's a form center of the competition. Looks incredible. So obviously with the goal kicking there too. So look at him as a potential pod play. He's one which he could easily score average 85 over the next 4 weeks. Over the next 6 weeks. So fantastic pod play there. I think those who own Tamalolo, you're looking good there. Besides that, I wouldn't bring in Hammer. Obviously Dearden. If whatever happens with Origin, but he's kind of come down a little bit, and I think that he's at this stage you don't want to bring someone like him because you're going to have to trade him out. But they're all kind of pod options for the run home, and that kind of brings me to my last pod analysis for the run home, which is the Titans. So a key pod's going to be David Fifita, 582K, break even of 79. He's on at 163K discount on his starting price. They've got a relatively good run home, especially the last 3. So they've got St. George, Newcastle, and Warriors. And in those last 3, I know the Titans on a fantastic side, but he's someone who can easily score oodles of points. They've got a relatively mixed matchup set in the foreseeable future with Broncos, Bulldogs, Raiders, Melbourne, and Manly. But I think you can bring him in this week and quite comfortably hold him for the rest of the season. Break even of 79 is the worst thing. He really scores about 50, but 582K, I think he's ready to go. And you're talking about an Isaac Tago to a David Fifita for a 60K price up. That is. It's difficult. It's difficult with 8 trades left of how to use him, but I think he's one I'm going to be firmly looking at. Him, Drinkwater, and Munster are my big 3 kind of trade-ins for the run home. Tarpanay, yes, to the extent I can too. would be fantastic. But if you're also looking at some pods from the Titans, as I always say, I love him. Hopefully, I don't think he's injured. I think he's actually still injured or suspended. But I love Philip Sami, always have. Sorry, I'm doing some research on the fly, but anyway, we'll see. Philip Sami, keep an eye on him. He's the type of player who can go on a big run. Always has that kind of potential in him. Maybe look in someone like a Brimo, 549k. He was very cheap. He was about 400k prior to moving back, and obviously with the injuries to Jaden Campbell. Average is pretty good: 72, 71, 65, and 84. Looking fantastic in those games. He's the type of person you can. I mean, I don't think at this stage of the season, unless you had 10 plus trades, you'd be going someone like him. I think you go for your Fafitas, and then you kind of look for pods from other teams. But you can, if you've got the trades or you're a head-to-head player looking for a bit of a differentiator, Brimo could be good. Besides that, I mean, I don't know how many Titans players you're necessarily looking at, but I kind of brought that one in to highlight David Fafita and how, yes, there's a bit of bullshittery with the coaching, but with that run home, he could be an easy kind of trade for the run home. You've got Tino also, depending on what happens with Origin. He's 650k, so expensive, and he scored 35 in 48 minutes, and we'll see how he backs up. But he's the type of player, again, who can go on a run, 72, 123, and 77 in his last 4 matches. So have a look. Maybe if his price comes down to 500k, you might be looking at him. And, of course, how can I forget him? Greg Marshu. Not the best in defence, but in attack, he's an absolute beast. 543k. 92, 72, and 60 in his last 3, with a break even of 53 and in 1% of teams. They come up against Broncos this week, Bulldogs. He might be someone that I'm looking firmly at because he just has that potential in him to just go huge. His base is huge. If you ever want something kind of interesting, go and have a look at his tackle bust stats from on SuperCoach. It's ridiculous. There's one, I think it's a game against Penrith. I think he scored 32 points in tackle bust, and against, I think it was Roosters or Souths, he scored 26 points in tackle bust. Ridiculous player. So he's someone you might look at as a pod, and in 1% of teams. So again, that's kind of maybe an option for a bit of a pod pick for the run home. So that kind of caps off our 2 points of this season. I've just seen Brandon's wife say, "When does the footy season end?" Sherry, I think it's going to end sooner than we know it, and there'll be a big gap between, I think is it September, late September, and March, in which you'll be seeing your hubby a lot more. I mean, again, assuming that he's not too much into the big the cricket which is coming on. So we'll see. In terms of questions, we have 9 questions here. Apologies for kind of relatively short episode. I'm trying to make this work with being in a completely different time zone. Would ideally love to go live, and I think it will work, but internet issues permitting, hopefully we'll be back with the lads soon, and we can work it out from then. But just have to stay patient, and hopefully I can also pick up a good mic, and can be easier for your run into work, whether you're in on a Monday or you're listening to this to wind down. So we have Josh Williams saying 903 pre-updates. How many trades should be used on bringing guns back into our sides? Grant, Munster, Teddy. How many should we save for the emergencies? I've got 9 left. I mean, I'd be saving 2 as emergencies. But also this is dependent on your team. If for example, if you've got 2 nuffs in your front row, and you've got, say, in your second row, you've only got another 1 playing player, I'd be keeping more than 2. But I think you should be prioritising probably 2 to 3 for emergencies, and then 6 to bring in guns is kind of my kind of perspective on it. Because I mean, I've had seasons where I've saved trades until the end and had 3 or 4 trades in the last 2 rounds, and it's just an absolute waste. I know bringing plays in for a 1 round is good, but if it means foregoing a gun, then I don't think that's a safe thing. So yeah, I'd be looking, if you've got, firstly, fantastic score, Josh, 9 to 3, you'll see a big rise there. But 9, I'd be looking at 3 for emergencies and 6 for guns. Yeah, that's how I'm kind of approaching it. And I've got relatively the same. I've got 8. So I'll be prioritizing 5 for the guns and 3 for emergencies and injuries. What did you score? Daniel Warby says, what did you score this round? What do you guys think past score for the round is? Covered that previously. I scored early 650s. I've covered everyone else. But I think past score is going to be 650, 700. So thanks for that, Danny. Anthony Licadello says, how many nuffs is too many thrown home? Looking to trade out halves next week to free up cash. Could go to someone like Uto to maintain depth, or straight to enough to maximize cash. Already have Paul, Anderson, Shannon Harris. I think you're looking at probably 4 or 5. 4 nuffs. Number one, I don't think Pole's enough. I think he'll end up staying that side, but you just never know. But let's just say, for example, he doesn't. And also, I don't think Uto is enough. He'll play, and I think his minutes will hopefully get better as the season goes. But again, we don't know what's going to happen with the Tigers. But I'm looking at, I've got Michael Milo is kind of enough. Jed Cartwright, Grant Anderson, so that's 3, and Trent People, so I've got 4. So I'm reluctant, maybe 1 more maximum, but I think you're looking at maybe 5 max, 3 minimum if you can. But just make sure you have cover in the right positions. I'm sure you're a sensible supercoacher, but if you've got enough in the hooker position, then make sure you have trades on par in case Grant, or if you haven't got Grant and one of those goes down. So be smart about that. But great question, Anthony. John Smith said, scored 567 this round. Welcome to the squad, mate. But good point is he's got 11 trades left with 2 boosts left. So his plan is to keep 3 trades and a boost for the last round. He's ranked 743. So you might have a little dip this week, Johnny, but fantastic season so far. I'm just looking at your side, which you've posted, which is helpful when we've got time to kind of go through this like we do now. Pretty decent side. Trey said trade planning Munster, Grant, Teddy, Cam Murray over the next 2 weeks. Yeah, depending on, we'll see how Munster comes up with the COVID. And Grant and Teddy and Murray come over Origin, but those all seem to be good over the next 2 to 3 weeks. Keep 3 trades and a boost for the last round to make up for the low score buy round. Yep, you could do that, or you could just go a couple of pods. Maybe go someone like Drinkwater if he doesn't have Drinkwater already. In fact, he already does, so well done to him. Really good side. I don't want to bore the listeners, but yeah, I think it's a good plan to get in those players. See what happens with Origin, but I think all of them are going to be ones that you're going to kind of want to make up. He said, who do you think are the must-have players in each position to run home? Of course, Cleary, Hines. I think fullback, you got Puppy and Turbo. Puppy and Teddy. But whether or not you bring in Teddy after having Drinkwater for the next 3 is something that you do. I think in 5'8", you've got I think you've got Munster and either of Walker and Brown. We'll see how Brown goes in his run, but I don't think you can go wrong with either of them. In centre wing, I think you've got Garrick, Manu, Ronaldo Mulatalo with the Shark straw, Taylor Mays, always a keeper. It's hard to say Valentine Holmes is the must, but I think he's pretty close. He looks fantastic. In the second row, you've got I mean, second row is not a fantastic position this year, but I think you've probably, assuming he plays, you got Madison Olakuatu, um, and Murray after Origin. I think he's close to a must if you've got him. Again, not everyone has the trades. I don't have the trades to bring in someone like a Murray, but I mean, you've also got Connor when he comes back. But second row, and also you got Lolo, but I don't think either of those are must-haves. I think they're more decent players to have. In the front row, I think you got IPAP and Joseph Tarpanay. I've got Joe O, so I'll see whether I go Tarpanay, but I think those are the two clear standouts in the front row. And hooker, I think you've just got Cook and Grant. But it also, again, it depends on your strategy of how many players you're going to bring in. So, I mean, all of them are fantastic plays. How many you bring in for the run home? John appears to have a relatively good side and has got a lot of them already. Obviously, halfback, he's got Cleary and Hines. So, yeah, I mean, just as many of them as you can, but also realise that with 8, the people who have less trades than you won't be able to get all those in. But you've got 11, so I think just use them. As I said, keep 3 for an emergency. But I think you should maybe have 1 last round and see how it is. And that brings us to the last question of the round. From Joshua Campbell, why did Jake McGibbon score so poorly? Well, he actually scored 100 points more than me. So if he scored poorly, I don't even want to begin to ask your description of my score. Which brings us to the end of the podcast. For those who have posted their questions and I haven't, taken them into account, apologies. It's Jim. The lads will be back on Tuesday. Thanks for listening. We'll work out how to work this so we can get some good content to you guys on Sundays. I anticipate keeping this up. And love the loyal Sunday listeners, but hopefully scored well in round 17. If you did, well done. If you didn't, always look forward. There's a long run to go, and hopefully we can all have a great run home. That's all from me. I'm off to watch Nick Kyrgios play at a pub in London, so very excited for that. Go to Kyrgios, and hopefully he gets up and wins the shock matchup. But otherwise, that's it from me. Hope you all have a fantastic week, and best of luck with round 18, and hopefully I'll catch you next Sunday. All right. See you guys.